Hey y'all, I just watched the video about Frederick's ataxia, and what an interesting video. What a sad video, if I'm to be honest. I definitely got choked up a little bit when I was watching it. I have never heard or really seen Frederick's ataxia before. I think I've actually heard about it in undergrad, but I never really saw a video or the characteristics or what it actually is. So it's really interesting this week that we're learning about ataxic dysarthria. And it's interesting because this part of this dysarthria really is caused by damage to the cerebellum, when everything else that we've been looking at in the past chapters, the different dysarthrias, those are due to damage with motor neurons. So in the upper motor neurons or the lower motor neurons. But this dysarthria is where there's damage to the cerebellum. And I found that interesting just because we're moving to a whole different part of the brain, and to see how those clinical signs really play out, especially in their speech. So this video displayed three families. The first was the Bodies, and the Bodies, they had two girls that both had Frederick's ataxia. And I found it interesting because I like that they compared their two symptoms to each other, and that Sam, she had the difference in that her balance was really her main problem, but that Alex, because she had a different build than Sam, she also had problems with her balance, but a lot of it was due to her build and her difficulty with her spine. So I just found that was really interesting, in that Alex actually had to have surgery on her spine to correct that, and that how they just present differently. And I even thought that their speech sounded differently. I could definitely tell with Alex that her speech sounded more monotone, and that it sounded more slurred, which is the characteristic of ataxic dysarthria that Freed talks about in our book. So I thought that was interesting, that I could just see a clear picture of what that looks like. So then there was the Orth family, and I also thought it was crazy that both of their boys got diagnosed with Frederick's ataxia. I thought that this was interesting because this case, the boys had such a rapid progression of their disease that in 2 years from diagnosis, they were in wheelchairs. And it was interesting because in the book, they do talk about Frederick's ataxia being kind of a rapid onset and being a rare disease. But these boys really had a rapid, onset, where they were from diagnosis, they didn't know anything was really wrong, to that they're in wheelchairs. I just can't imagine what that would be like for a family dynamics. So I thought it was also terrible that Ben, because he had kind of worse scoliosis, that he decided on his own to have corrective surgery on his spine, and that he died just from getting too many liquids, that his heart couldn't handle it. I thought that was very interesting, and just so tragic that he had to die just from a surgical complication. But I found it heartwarming that the parents are hopeful that there's going to be a cure, and that these organs can be used to further research. I thought that was very heroic, and that I'm sure that would be one of my only hopes if I was that mom. I'm interested to see in the other brother how his scoliosis is affecting him, if he's had to have surgery by now, or what his prognosis is looking like. Then the last case was Donovan, and he was a younger boy, and I liked seeing him because he was way younger than the other two cases. And I thought that it was interesting that one of his first clinical signs that his parents saw was that he was just a clumsy kid, that his babysitters were reporting that overall he just was clumsy. And I thought that also that it was really heartwarming that he had a buddy. He was able to play sports, and then he had a buddy to help him play sports. I just found that interesting, and how they had that dog that was able to kind of feel what Donovan felt. And I'm sure that was very helpful and empathetic for the family. So now moving on to assessment and treatment for how that changes working with a kid. So I think just that overall assessment and treatment, because this disease has such a rapid progressive nature, assessment and treatment especially needs to be functional. That, kids can come to your treatment session and you can do these articulation therapies to help with their slurred speech and make it a game, make it fun like we do with our regular Artic kids. So, but I think just a main purpose or difference between working with kids is just how you work with any difference from a kid to an adult, is that you make it fun, you make it that they want to come, you make it positive, especially with the progressive nature of this disorder. Also, I found it interesting that the doctor in the video, he talked about how the cause of Friedreich's ataxia is that there's this one gene that doesn't produce enough of a protein, and so therefore they don't have enough energy. And I thought that that was really interesting. I love learning kind of the root causes of disorders. And so I hope that there's research going on that is going to, some kind of medication that these people can take to get, to help produce this protein if they're not able to do it on their own. I thought it was interesting how in Alex, the first family, in her report that she talked about how her speech, she couldn't really understand why, it wasn't coming out the way she wanted it to, or why was it sounding slurred, why was it sounding monotone. And I thought this was interesting because it's kind of like Khan from last week and how he couldn't perceive that he was sounding completely different than what he thought. He thought he was sounding normal, but other people perceived him and could hear his dysarthria. So I thought that was interesting that Alex was able to note on that she was just wondering why, she thinks she's trying to do everything right and speak it in the best way, but it's just not coming out in the correct way. So yeah, I found that this was really interesting because I haven't seen this before. I have a client with spastic dysarthria, so it was really interesting to see the difference in their characteristics of their speech. It was interesting to hear that slurred speech, that monotone sound. So yeah, excited to hear from y'all. Bye.